from Haben Girma. I dream of a future where students can just be students instead of having to juggle the roles of student, teacher, and advocate. Joining me now is Haben Girma to talk about her new book, Haben, the Deafblind Woman Who Conquered Harvard Law. Welcome.
Thanks for having me here. As you learned from the title of my book, I'm deafblind and have limited vision and hearing. I want to be able to connect with people just like everyone else. So throughout my life, I've been seeking solutions to increase the way to connect with people. There's sign language, there's print on palm, where you can write letters on palm. There's finger spelling, which Helen Keller used. One of my strongest skills is Braille, reading with my fingers, my sense of touch. So I found a way to connect Braille with a keyboard so that it would be easier for me to connect and talk with people. So during this conversation, as you speak, Cameron is typing on a keyboard and the keyboard is connected wirelessly and shows up digital Braille that I'm reading on my fingers. Do you want to try it, Alex?
Sure. I'm so excited to interview you.
I'm excited to be interviewed by Alex.
And I'm going to pass it back over here. I want to talk about your book. What audience are you trying to reach with your writing?
I want to reach all audiences. Most people don't understand the struggles faced by people with disabilities. And there's ableism. Ableism is the idea that people with disabilities are inferior to the non-disabled. We're not inferior, but that's the message that society gives out. So through my book, I have lots of stories, fun, engaging stories that show examples of ableism and strategies people with disabilities can use to remove those barriers. And strategies non-disabled people, like your audience is watching and the disabled audience is watching, to remove barriers so that our whole world can be more inclusive.
We're definitely going to talk about those. But first, I want to go back to that quote I read when I introduced you. How did you have to balance the roles of student, teacher, and advocate to get to where you are?
Yeah, at first, I could not balance them. It was overwhelming and exhausting. Most people in school are just students, but because the material in school was provided visually, written on the board, the teacher saying out loud what the homework was, I was missing it. And in order to get it, I finally realized I had to be my own teacher. I had to advocate and check in. What's the assignment? Because I didn't see what you wrote on the board. What did you say at the end of class? Because I missed it. And my grades improved dramatically when I took responsibility for my own education. And I became a stronger advocate, first for myself, then for other people.
You do a lot of public speaking, you've gone surfing, you've even climbed glaciers. Is there anything that still intimidates you?
One thing I can't do is cartwheeling. I think if I trained with an Olympic gymnast, maybe I'd learn it. But time is valuable. I don't necessarily want to use my time to study gymnastics when I could advocate or write books. Writing is a form of advocacy.
Let's talk a little bit more about your advocacy, starting off with why is the Americans with Disabilities Act such a crucial step towards equality for people with disabilities?
So before the ADA, when people with disabilities encountered barriers, we would feel stuck. What can we do? How can we compel organizations to remove barriers? And I discovered this when I was in college. I attended Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon, and this was after the ADA was passed. The ADA was passed in 1990. And the school Lewis and Clark did a fantastic job providing me access to materials in school. My exams were in Braille. My textbooks were in Braille. There was just one problem. The cafeteria menus were only in print. And as a blind student, I couldn't read them. Blindness wasn't the problem. The problem was the format of the menu. Back then, I was vegetarian. There were about 6 different food stations. I'd wait in line, get food, try the food, and then often it wasn't even a vegetarian meal. That was really frustrating. So I went to the cafeteria manager and asked, can you provide the menu in Braille or post it online or email it to me? I have technology that allows me to use websites and email. The manager said, we're very busy. We have over 1,000 students. We can't do this kind of specialized service. And I tolerated that for a while. I told myself, at least I'm getting an education. At least I have some food. Mm-hmm. But when we accept unfairness, it just follows us. It continues. It never goes away if we don't advocate for the removal of those barriers. So I did research, talked to advocates. Then I went back to the cafeteria manager and explained, the Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities. Mm-hmm. And if you don't provide access to the menus, I'm going to take legal action. Mm-hmm. I had no idea what I would do. I was 19 and couldn't afford a lawyer, but I knew I wanted to try and had to do something. Mm-hmm. That conversation switched the culture from thinking of services for people with disabilities as charity to actually thinking about it as a mandatory requirement, part of civil rights. From that point on, they started providing access to the menus. The next year, a new blind student came to the college, and he had access to the menus. That taught me when I advocate, I remove barriers for all the students, for all the people who come after me. And that's what inspired me to study law and use the Americans with Disabilities Act to remove barriers.
You mentioned your career in law. What do you think is currently the biggest threat to the rights of people with disabilities?
People with disabilities also have talents. A lot of us forget that, or a lot of people, unfortunately, forget that. And we need to remind people that everyone has challenges and strengths. People with disabilities have talents too. So the biggest threat is ableism, the idea that people with disabilities have no talents and are inferior to the non-disabled. Stories are a way to change that idea, to offer society positive definitions of disability.
In particular, in your book, I really enjoyed reading about your trip to the White House, where you were honored as a champion for change, and you met President Obama and Vice President Joe Biden. How do the policies now for people with disabilities differ between that administration and the current one?
So, under President Obama, we had so many advocates working at the White House to increase opportunities for the disabled. And I remember President Obama passed a resolution to increase, to remove the word retarded from our vocabulary because it's offensive and hurtful to people with intellectual disabilities. Language is powerful, and we need to be thoughtful about the language we use. The current administration is hurting the disability community and constantly working to remove opportunities and rights. And it's really difficult, and advocates across the country are working to protect our rights and work for justice for people with disabilities.
As a Black woman and the child of refugees, have you felt any anti-immigrant sentiment intersect with your work?
My parents are from Eritrea and Ethiopia. I grew up hearing about the war and struggles. And there was actually an incident due to the war where my father was taken away from me. And I was 7 years old on a plane just with my father until they took him away. It was terrifying. And even now to this day, I still carry those fears and the trauma. He escaped, he made it back, and I'm really, really grateful. But there's so many kids who have been separated from their parents, and that needs to stop. It's awful.
One of the things we mentioned a couple of times is ableism. What are some ways that progressive people can actually be ableist, even if they think that they're not?
It is so frustrating when you try to educate someone who's ableist and they get defensive. Often they'll say, I'm just being nice. So it's okay to not know everything. No one knows everything. If someone tries to educate you about some harm you're causing, such as ableism, be open to learning, be open to feedback.
You mentioned being open to feedback. What is one effective way folks can fight against ableism?
There are lots of barriers. In order to remove them, we need to ask ourselves, what are some of the barriers that exist, and start asking. I would love for more people to ask their employers, are our services accessible? Is our facility accessible? Are our videos accessible? Are we including captions and transcripts to reach more people? So ask these questions and get people thinking about accessibility.
We have time for one more question, I think. Any plans to write another book? What's next for you?
So writing is powerful to teach people. I've shared some of the lessons that I've learned from my life, and I'm gathering more lessons to share with people. The next book, I haven't fully decided, but if I do a second book, I would think I'd focus more on relationships between people and the work we need to do to go past our differences so that we can fully connect.
Well, Haben, it was wonderful getting to learn more about your work. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me here.
Haben is available wherever books are sold. Up next, we're responding to a few more of your tweets.